Womanjeka, let's transform eco-anxiety to action. Series 3 of the 2Bays podcast is a collaboration between Regeneration Projects, UN Youth Australia and RMIT University. We acknowledge the two Great Bays, Port Phillip and Western Port, which are known to Melbourne's First Peoples as Nairn and Maureen or Murrumbik. So we show deep respect to First Nations elders across Australia, past and present, who for over 60,000 years have cared for country with rich ecological knowledge. Their leadership reminds us of our own responsibility as a B Corp and actor in the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration. Heads up, when you hear the statistics, this is going to hit home. But don't worry, there's good people doing good things to transform eco-anxiety to action, and you're in safe hands. Originally from France, Maureen Pillon now lives in Wurundjeri country in Naarm, Melbourne. She's the co-chair of the Young Tourism Network and works as a city economy coordinator at the City of Melbourne. Heading west to Whadjuk Noongar country in Boorloo, Perth, Dora Marinova is a professor at Curtin University of Technology and, like our next guest, was originally from Bulgaria. Vasil Samarjiev now calls Tarntanya Adelaide home, and as you might already know, he's the Chief Youth Representation Officer at UN Youth Australia, our series partner. In a nutshell, the academic and industry research on youth climate anxiety is alarming. But elevating research to decision makers is absolutely critical to moving forward. And innovations in policy, investment and capacity building are ready and waiting to be scaled. Womanjeka, Vasil, welcome back. How have you been since we last recorded? And I'm curious to hear, was there anything that resonated from that first episode?
Yes, thank you, Matt. Thank you for having me once again. I hope I don't bore people with my voice once again. I think what has resonated is similar to what I said at the end of last episode. I expected this space to be a very welcoming and interesting and enlightening space, but I didn't expect it to be this engaging, and I have not stopped thinking about some of our conversations that we had last week. So I'm very excited to pick it back up and dig even deeper.
I actually hear you, and we were just doing some work with some of our colleagues here at RMIT who are working on the campaign back of house on all of this work to make sure that it's seamless. And we sat around and we were having a circle conversations, and it's amazing when you start having these conversations, it sparks something, it hits home, and we know that these podcasts too are going to help people all around Australia and perhaps beyond to spark conversations in their own home regions. Womanjeka, Dora, great to be bridging the continents. When did life actually first bring you to Australia's City of Light, Perth?
I should say Kaya, because this is the Noongar way of saying hello. And I've been using Kaya in the last 32 years. I came here with the intention to check the place on a one-year contract with a university, and 32 years later, I'm still living in Perth. And I'm actually enjoying and appreciating everything that this continent and this country can offer, not just academically, but environmentally and the people. It is just an amazing place to be.
We are incredibly fortunate, Dora, and obviously, it really got under your skin, and we're very lucky to have you here, and we're looking forward to hearing you share some of your wisdom and knowledge through the research that you've been doing. Womanjeka, Maureen, really nice to have you here in the studio. What's the vibe like at the Young Tourism Network as we start to dive into spring?
Hi, Matt. Thank you for having me. Well, I guess the vibe is, a lot of fulfillment, but also a bit of fatigue. It's been quite a busy year for YTN. We've hosted many events trying to showcase the diversity in the tourism industry. We've got 10 ambassadors now featured on our website. We have also hosted our first Emerging Tourism Leader Summit, which was like a one-day full-on kind of conference style when we're like kind of talking about the leadership journey and the vision for the future in the industry. We still have 3 more events coming up, and one's quite exciting because it's launching a partnership with Intrepid Travel. So obviously that's great because that touches on the purpose beyond profit and the values around that young people are like very attached to. So yeah, that's still a bit of excitement for the rest of the year.
Yeah, curious. I feel like I want to go on a tangent at this point, but I'm going to have to restrain myself. But yeah, brilliant to have you all here in the conversation, and grateful to dive into what is quite a serious issue. But I guess like these issues, understanding and being exposed to the statistics and the insights is only the first step. It's actually what we then do that. But it is important to have a sound base of knowledge to be able to inform decision making in our own lives, whether it's in our educational institutions, schools, universities, TAFEs, but also in businesses, government bodies, and so on. So, Dora, I'm going to come straight back to you, actually. You teamed up with some colleagues on an article titled Australia's University Generation Z and its Concerns about Climate Change, which was published by Sustainable Earth Reviews in March this year. One of the stats that really hit home for me was this one. 81% of young people you surveyed were significantly concerned and many experiencing serious climate anxiety. 81% of young people significantly concerned and many experiencing serious climate anxiety. Can you please explain this startling finding for listeners and how you walk through this inquiry?
It was not that surprising for me because we've already had quite a lot of indication that there is a generational gap as far as concerns about climate change are related to the way older people and younger people react to that. But it was really interesting to see, and this is what came out of the study, is that there is no gender differences. So we surveyed close to 450 university students, all of them adults from across several states, 6 states of Australia, including Western Australia, Victoria, New South Wales, the Australian Capital Territory, Queensland, and we saw that they all shared the same levels of very concerned in relation to climate change. And most previous research somehow was saying that women tend to be more concerned about climate change, while in our sample it is across. It didn't matter whether they were men, whether they were women, they were equally concerned. The other thing that was quite interesting about this survey, it's obviously students, university students who are the future, the professionals of the future of this country. And when we ask questions in relation to why they're concerned, so the survey was a combination of ticking boxes as well as explaining why. This is when the climate anxiety came from the qualitative answers from the respondents to the survey, and that was surprising for us. We know that young people, the future belongs to them. They should be optimistic. They should be making plans, particularly university students. They should be making plans as to how they see their future, rather than being concerned about what's going to happen with extreme weather events, whether it's worth having families and children, buying houses, because the future looks bleak. And so that was something that, on the one hand, it's good to see that the young people are aware of what's happening in the real world. But on the other hand, we see the fact that we are overwhelmingly leaving serious issues to be dealt by the young people of Australia.
Yeah, thank you for sharing, Dora. And yeah, that just as you share that last point about kind of passing the baton on, and I think for many people feeling like that there's being a hard card that's being dealt. There's an injustice there that really grinds for a lot of people. And in terms of the stats hitting home, I was just having a conversation before with some of the colleagues here at RMIT, and one of them talked about a conversation that she'd had with a friend back when she was 17 years old, and this is a few years ago now. But the friend was saying, "I'm not going to have a child because I'm not sure that there's going to be a planet in 50, 60 years time. I don't know what that's going to be like." And so if you think about statistics and things hitting home, and we do see this in the media and other research, it's very real. It's there. It's present. But of course, we want to find ways of understanding so that we can better move forward. Maureen, if I come across to you now, Regeneration Projects teamed up with the Young Tourism Network both in 2021 and also 2022 to conduct some groundbreaking research on young people's perspectives on the state of Victorian and also Australian tourism. In the Workplaces report, that's the latter one that came out of 2022, we found that 1/3 of young people surveyed felt that their workplaces actually increases their climate anxiety. So that's 1/3 of young people who arrive at work in the morning and they leave feeling more concerned about the future, about climate change, and take home not just some money in their pocket, but also some climate anxiety. Do you want to share a little bit of context around this? And also, I'm curious to hear whether you think these types of sentiments in workplaces are restricted to the tourism industry, or do you think that transition beyond the university generation and age group that Dora's talking about is actually happening in workplaces as well?
Right, yes. So for that report, we've invited young people to share their thoughts on the challenges they face in the industry. And the report underscored pressing needs for organizations to address ongoing workforce and challenges and actively support the careers of young leaders in the tourism industry. Also providing some strategic imperative for decision makers to harness the passion of young people, their skills as well, and especially in addressing environmental and social challenges. And so obviously, this 1/3 stat was quite alarming. And I was actually Googling the other day about that, and I could find just so many links and data reports talking about that same intense feeling of anxiety and dread among young people. And they obviously, like, young people are very much aware that they are the generation that, and the future generation, that going to be the most affected by climate change. Another stat that was interesting in that report is only 44% of young people indicated that they work for organizations that publicly report their social, environmental, and economic impact. So that's when we identified a massive gap between young people expectation and the current practices within many organizations. The report also revealed that 9 out of 10 people agree that the industry should focus on regeneration, creating net benefits, and not just sustainability. So really, in summary, what emerged from it is that the report clear a demand from the young people for a purpose beyond profit, meaningful career opportunities, and other stuff that really probably not relevant for today's conversation. But going back to your second questions, I do think it goes way beyond to the tourism industry. I think every leader should be concerned about the rising climate anxiety, regardless of the sector they operate in. And also, even if the organization doesn't currently employ young people, they are actually going to enter the workforce. So it's crucial to be prepared to be supporting them. So really, like, taking action based on these insights will not just empower young leaders, but also pave the way for a more inclusive, sustainable, and resilient future across all industries.
Brilliant. Yeah, the way you've articulated that, Maureen, is so clear, and I think that the impact on, and it's a bit of a heads up almost on workplaces. It's saying if you're not exceeding it yet, you're going to.
You're gonna have to.
Yeah. And if we think about workplace staff engagement, we think about productivity, not just individual organisations, but economy as a whole. If we don't respond to this, if we don't engage this,
Yep.
we're going to get stuck, hey?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I guess this is the important aspect here. We've heard a lot of things, particularly last year. There was a lot of conversations around productivity that continued through into 2024. And what I noticed was that perhaps in some of the forums that were being convened, including by government organisations, but also industry groups, perhaps there wasn't a strong youth voice as could have been represented in these spaces.
Absolutely. And sorry, I didn't talk about that, but that's part of the report as well, is like, that desire for young voices to be heard way more and have a platform where they can like really express what they're feeling and what we should be doing, and their ambition, their thoughts on what's going on. Very important. And I can hear it from so many different industries and not just the tourism one.
Yeah, and I think that's really, really important. But it seems like there was the pioneering work that came out of that was probably a silver lining of the dramatic impacts that COVID had on tourism events and hospitality. But you did allude that there's some exciting things that YTN is involved in, and actually some of those were built upon some of the recommendations and some catalytic funding which emerged out of there. We'll come back to that perhaps later, but I guess just for our listeners, this is not all doom and gloom, because when the platform, when there's a bit of coherence, we can get a run on, and we can start to see some of those early adopters and change makers come through. Vasil, I'd like to think that UN Youth Australia's annual report might have been more hopeful in terms of its insights, but I suspect you may have seen similar patterns. I'm curious, when we look at the 2023 annual report from UNYA, what you might have heard, and also early signals that you might be seeing in your 2024 report as part of the listening tour that you do each year.
Thank you, Matt. Yes, I can echo the sentiments that have just been shared up until now. I'm looking at the report from 2023 as I'm speaking, and it says young people are anxious and stressed about how climate change will negatively impact their lives and the lives of their future families. There's very big sentiments that young people are acutely aware of what the issues are. Now more than ever, young people know what aspects of climate change and what aspect of the environment are under threat. But they do not know exactly how this will affect them in the future, and that scares them. The generational gap that Dora talked about, I can definitely back as well. Through our research, what we have found is young people saying that they're being told two completely different narratives. Firstly, that they're future leaders of the world and they need to rise to tackle the global challenges, and that it's up to them. And then also in the same narrative, that they are too naive, that they lack the life experience, that they need to sit down, go to school, and not be involved in the process until some point in the future when they have to be. And this scares and frustrates young people. They are told they need to prepare for the future, but they're not told exactly what they need to prepare for or how to prepare for it. And this continues to come up. Last year, climate change was listed among the most important issues that young people care about by 64% of our survey respondents. 32% of our survey respondents put it as their most important issue by far. These statistics are, however, changing this year. Our early indications from our survey is actually that climate change is being lost as a singular issue identified by young people among the sea of other issues that they're pointing out. So in simple terms, what we're noticing is that there's no clear, I guess, winner, or should I say loser, of the most important issue for young Australians. Young people are starting to care about everything equally, which shows us one thing, is that young people are more aware of how each issue impacts the other. Climate change is not this year more so than ever, seen as this siloed issue that everyone needs to put their effort into and forget about everything else. Young people are realizing that climate change is affected by cost of living, by the level of education that young people get, by how safe and welcome they feel for their identity, and also how able they are to participate in the political and the democratic process at the moment. What young people continue to tell us is they want to know more about how government works. 81% of young people that we surveyed last year said they want to know about how more about how government works. What they're also telling us is that they're not involved in decision making. 12% of them feel like they're involved in decision making. That is not enough. So the sentiments that we're getting, in short, is young people care about climate change. Young people are worried about climate change. Young people want to know more about what's going on. And young people want to be involved more as a result in being part of the change, and want to bring their experience and their unique perspective into it.
Thank you, Vasil. Yeah, it's challenging here. I think that distinction and the transition, perhaps that you're noting in between last year and this year, is a telling one. And as you say, it is encouraging that that myriad of interconnected issues is becoming more clear. But it's tricky because then the energy is trying to look forward. How do we be proactive? How do we be solutions focused? How do we step forward? And there was one particular aspect of last year's report that I found particularly interesting. I think you shared this when we first had a meeting back in May, June, but I'm curious to hear Dora and Maureen's point on this as well. The report says that there's these feelings of despondency, of hopelessness, of being stressed and angry and so on. But they feel less and less action is being taken. These feelings were amplified by constant attempts to downplay the seriousness of the issue or discredit young people's passion or their right to protest or engage in discussion on the issue due to their naivety, especially by the media or caregivers. Now, that's a really tricky position to be in. And I personally think there's a bit of a reflection there in that when we talk about mental health issues as a society in Australia, we have a long way to go. There's stigmas that are still attached to these things. And I suspect that some of our older peers grew up and were not equipped themselves with tools. I can vouch for that in my own family. But I guess that feeling that young people have still exists. Maureen, I'm curious yourself. Is when you've been navigating intergenerational conversations yourself, how you've seen some of this play out in the tourism industry, which is where you're more closely connected. Does this feeling of being downplayed or discredited, is this something that resonates? Have you experienced this? Do you see this, or has that not so much been your experience?
Yes. Look, I don't have the report with me, so I don't remember the stat is, but I definitely remember it was like a big one in the report around feeling like belittled by your employer or the colleagues you're working with, or whatever interaction you may have. So being looked at as like a young person that doesn't know life or doesn't have enough experience to be talking about big subject like climate change, but at the same time being like, oh, this is your generation, this is what your life is going to be in 50 years. So like I can definitely relate to what Vasil was talking about, and like it's really like a bipolar kind of things happening, and when you have like some different conversation, a lot of young people, especially I would say in Australia, because we such a diverse population with people coming from so many different countries, and some people that have potentially immigrated here have faced very different challenges in terms of climate change. They may have experienced like a very different kind of environment from one year to the other. Maybe their family experienced that very dearly as well, and so like not being able to hear those voices is very problematic.
Yeah, absolutely. Dora, I'm curious, this sense of, it's almost a bit of a disempowerment, but not just of young people, of older people as well, in this tension we're feeling. Did something like this show up in your research? And perhaps if I may, where did the research also start to point to as like where could be some of our next steps from here?
We didn't see, at least in the survey that we did not see this experience of young people's concern being downplayed. But what we saw was their desire to have answers, their desire to see how older generations respond to the responsibility that they have in policy making. So we didn't see the young people being the victims, but at the same time, we saw them wanting to see action, wanting to engage, wanting to channel some of this concern into activism. But activism, they do it very differently from other generations. So it's very much digitally connected. It's very much around particular social issues or environmental issues that unite them. So you don't expect Generation Z to go and lobby the local politician in a way they've given hope in the local politician, but they will unite in groups and they will take action. So it's really important to allow young people to feel empowered that they can come up with possible solutions and they can come up with new ways of doing things, and beautiful examples can come not just from research and academia, they can come from industry. In many ways, industry is leading the response to climate change. So it's not only the politicians, the policymakers. We see a lot of innovation coming from industry and responses that give hope. The other thing I also want to say, and this is linked to what Vasil was talking about, how the issues are intertwined and how the connections that young people are making between them no longer point at one major concern. So you have biodiversity loss, you have even demographic concerns such as decreasing life expectancies, decreasing fertility rates. You have issues such as plastics pollution, which is so pervasive everywhere, as well as things in relation how we grow food and how we essentially guarantee the new right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment that every person, including young people, are supposed to have under the United Nations Human Rights Charter. So it is a very complex situation, but I'm feeling optimistic, mainly because young people know how to find the answers. So they're not leaving things to, they don't rely on previous generations, so they want to take ownership, and so I'm feeling overall optimistic. But at the same time, I need to be realistic because the mental health problems that we are seeing with Generation Z are probably the highest level of mental health problems that we have experienced with any other generation. So it is really important to channel this negativity or these concerns into action and into expanding the knowledge and the solutions that young people can provide.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that transforming eco-anxiety to action is absolutely the spirit of this series and also the broader campaign that we've been working on with UN Youth Australia. But there is actually one extra thread before we start to steer the conversation to a close. But there was some interesting insights in your research, Dora, where you were looking at young people's relationships with technology, and technology as a vehicle for, putting their voice out there into the world using social media. Do you want to just elaborate a little bit more on how integral technology is to the way that young people are showing up and being in the world today?
The Generation Z are digitally native, so they live in the technological world, and they know how to use technology, and they're very comfortable with that. Uh, but at the same time, they have to be mm, able to understand a lot of the challenges that they will face to be able to find solutions. So technology is in many ways the hope of Generation Z, but it has to be done in a knowledgeable way. It has to be done in a way that empowers rather than takes away the ability of young people to influence the future.
Yeah, that last point that you're making there is, it's a big one, and I see a lot of organisations, including our own, starting to look at technology. We're creating an app with University of Melbourne interns at the moment that can look to this issue as well. But it's a powerful tool and a powerful gateway, and yeah, we need all possible resources that we can to navigate through this. Maureen, as we start to lift our gaze and acknowledge not just the heaviness and the frustration and sometimes the anger around these issues, but when we do rally together, when we do put our thoughts forward clearly, there are ways of moving forward and being heard. And I think YTN's journey, just some of the initiatives you've been talking about that are already happening this year, are great examples of that. Do you personally think that if more young people in different industries across Australia start to organise and start to put recommendations forward to their industry leaders, that they can also create better pathways for themselves and their peers too?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we had, thanks to those two reports that we've mentioned before, that's how we got support from the state government as well, and financial, because YTN is like a volunteer-run committee, so we don't have a lot of time and resources, so it's essential that we're getting support from other organizations. So this year with the summit, the ambassador program, the Launchpad program, all of those initiatives were like definitely coming out of the report and all those recommendations that we've put through. So all the voices that we've heard were put into the recommendation and were like heard through that report. So there is a lot that can be done as well, even within the organization and the workplaces. Obviously, we had that daunting stat, but we also, I've heard recently that 4 out of 5 young people are interested in social environmental impacts. So there is really something that employers can do, and obviously they've got a role to play in supporting their staff well-being and emotional states. But they've got like building strategies to help them becoming stronger as well for young perspective. So it kind of makes good business sense to invest in environmental projects that are empowering staff. One example, like really easy, will be to work towards on environmental policy, but getting staff voices into it and like co-working with people, like not just young people, but like everyone in the organization. So like their voices can like be heard way better, and that ensure that the leadership team is also held to account.
Yeah, and I think that example there of activating these conversations inside organisations, inside local communities is key, because that's where I think some of the greatest impact can be felt. Folks, we're going to have to start to wrap up here, but we know that this one has been a little bit heavier, but we did want to ground ourselves in a relatively sobering way so that we could see the way that the academic insights, the way that the industry insights, and young people's voices consistently sharing these perspectives. Now, we know that this issue is not something that we can change overnight, But what we're going to be doing from here is starting to spotlight some of the solutions, some of the changes, some of the ways that organisations like YTN have been moving forward, and to be able to present those as ways of scaling these types of innovations. And so that's an opportunity for all of us to get behind. Vasil, as we start to bridge towards this research, we've done the grounding episode in that first one, hearing Joey and Charlotte speak passionately from School Strike for Climate. We've gone deep today, and it is a little bit heavy, and it is a little bit raw. But as we start to lift the gaze, what are you looking forward to in these upcoming episodes?
Oh, I think this episode in and of itself has been a very much of a deeper exploration into some of the issues that we're talking about. I'm excited to continue welcoming more guests from very different fields. I think people's perspectives, the strength of people's perspectives is that they are unique and that they come from very different backgrounds with a very different understanding of how we should be solving these issues. What I am looking forward to most is having more of those deeper, frank conversations. I believe part of what we are talking about today is really about the fact that these issues are very big, but what they need is smaller on the ground solutions that are manageable and achievable and are actually fit for purpose. So I'm excited to dig deeper, because I think in digging deeper we'll be able to reach those smaller, more achievable solutions that are best catered to the people that we're trying to cater for.
Well, I'm up for going on this journey with you, so lead the way and let's keep going deeper, as you say. Just mindful that there is a seriousness around some of these subjects, in that sometimes they can be quite triggering. And so regardless of your age, if you are listening and you found this conversation quite heavy and you just feel like you need some extra support, please don't hesitate to reach out to the kind of support systems that we have available. Lifeline, Beyond Blue, Health Direct, these types of platforms that can just point us. And sometimes it's a friend, sometimes it's a family member, but it's so important that you're not alone. There's a lot of people that feel this stuff. They don't even have the words for it. A lot of people don't even know that there's a thing called eco-anxiety. But when you describe what it is and they hear other people sharing, they're like, yep, I get it. I know what that is. So you're not alone, and we are going to continue on this journey together. So hold tight and let's start to look at what are the things that we can do next. How can we start to shift the dial by using the examples that are there? Thank you to Vasil, thank you Dora, and thank you to Maureen for joining us today. Nung Gudjan, and look forward to seeing you on the next episode of the Two Bays podcast. Cheers. This Two Bays series, Transforming Eco-Anxiety to Action, is part of Regeneration Project's ongoing work in building young Australians' ecological literacy, leadership and entrepreneurship skills. If you're an educator, employer, decision maker, or a young person passionate about positive change, go to our new website, twobays.earth, to discover our new app, educational workshops and capacity building programs. Folks, that's a wrap. Thanks to our series partners, UN Youth Australia and RMIT University, special guests researching, advocating and innovating solutions, and listeners. Remember, subscribe to Two Bays on your favourite podcast platform and Instagram. My name is Matt, and on behalf of Regeneration Projects, Nung Gudjan, thank you for tuning in, and see you on the next episode of the Two Bays podcast.